You have 30 days to remove that bridge. Constance Whitmore screamed it right in my face, her voice tight with that specific type of arrogant authority you only find in HOA presidents. And then she turned and walked away, those expensive heels clicking on the gravel like a rapid-fire countdown. I looked down at the notice taped to my wrought iron gate. Remove my bridge, or they'd remove it for me. A clear deadline, a threat wrapped in white paper. She didn't know what I knew, of course. They wanted my land, sure. It was the quiet, private prize they all eyed. And a piece of paper seemed like a weapon enough. But here's the thing about power, something my grandfather taught me long ago. The loudest voice isn't always the one holding the cards. Sometimes it's the quiet one who not only built the deck, but who controls the infrastructure underneath it. It was 7 o'clock on a cool Monday morning, and the sunlight was just breaking through the kitchen window, falling across the old wooden counter. The house creaked once, a comfortable, familiar sound that meant everything was still standing. Outside, Merrick Creek ran slow and silver beneath the sturdy bridge my grandfather built in 1954. The water caught the light, reflecting pieces of sun up through the trees. Then I heard the car, an engine cutting through the morning quiet, tires crunching gravel on the county road. I didn't move toward the door, just watched through the kitchen window as a black SUV, one of those aggressively polished models, pulled up outside my gate. 3 people climbed out. Constance Whitmore first, naturally, precise in her movements, her expression set like someone who'd already dictated how this would end. 2 nervous board members flanked her, clipboards clutched like small, useless shields. She walked straight to my gate, her heels making small puncture sounds against the ground, and taped something carefully to the metal frame. Then she turned, looked directly at the house, and her mouth tightened into something that was halfway between a smile and a warning. They climbed back into the SUV and were gone in less than 2 minutes. It was all so theatrical, so unnecessary. I waited until the engine sound faded completely before I walked outside. The morning air carried the smell of wet leaves and creek water. My boots left prints in the dew-covered grass as I crossed the yard. The notice fluttered slightly in the breeze, white paper stark against the weathered iron. I pulled it free. The header read, Pine Valley Estates Homeowners Association. Below that, typed in angry bold, unauthorized structure identified on shared easement. The owner must remove it within 30 days or face legal action. Daily fines of $500 will apply after the deadline. This is your final notice. I read it twice. Then I folded it once and walked back inside. The coffee had gone lukewarm. Shared easement. They were claiming the bridge sat on common property. The bridge my family built 70 years ago on land we owned before Pine Valley Estates existed, before this whole valley was anything but dirt roads and farmland. I opened the drawer beneath the kitchen counter, the one that stuck unless you pulled it at a specific angle, and took out the metal file box my grandfather gave me when I turned 18. I spread the documents across the kitchen table, the original deed records, the survey maps, old photographs of the land when it was truly empty. The survey map from 1970, faded but legible, clearly placed the bridge entirely within Merrick property. In the margin, my grandfather's firm handwriting, easement agreement, verbal goodwill only. Goodwill. That's what he'd built this entire place on. Let the neighbors use the bridge when they need it. Let the county run a power line through. He even built a substation on the property when the valley started growing, thinking it would serve everyone fairly. I ran my finger along the edge of the survey map, tracing the property line. Then I looked out the window toward Pine Valley Estates. The gated community sprawled across what used to be quiet, empty hills, 120 homes packed behind brick walls and electronic gates. I'd noticed small power fluctuations last week, their street lamps flickering slightly. Nothing major, just enough to catch the attention of a retired urban planner who knows that infrastructure should be invisible, consistent. I pulled my phone from my pocket and dialed Iris Calloway. She answered on the second ring. Silas, it's early. Her voice already carrying that lawyer's sharpness. I told her about the notice. She went silent for 3 seconds. I counted, then said, they can't do that. The bridge is private property. I'll draft a response. Don't do anything until we talk this afternoon. I agreed and hung up. Then I walked to the second drawer, the deep one on the right side of the table. I took out the thick folder labeled in my own careful handwriting from 15 years ago, Merrick Substation Power Supply Agreement 1998. I just rested my hand on top and looked out the window again. The bridge sat 50 yards from my front door, solid wooden planks, steel supports underneath, wide enough for one vehicle. It crossed Merritt Creek and connected to County Road 47, the road that led to town. And, more importantly, the road that led to the main entrance of Pine Valley. Their secondary route, Oak Drive, was steep, prone to erosion, and I remembered seeing caution signs posted every autumn. Their main access was, essentially, dependent on my goodwill. I finished my coffee cold, walked out onto the bridge. I knelt down and ran my hand along the railing. Solid wood, recently treated, no rot. I'd maintained it myself, same as my father and my grandfather. There was a small metal plaque bolted to the railing. Private property, Merrick Family St. 1954. Someone had recently scratched at it with a key or coin, trying to scrape the words off. I stood up slowly. Land doesn't lie, my grandfather had told me. Paper might. People definitely will, but land tells the truth if you know how to listen. Back at the kitchen table, I opened my laptop. 20 years in urban planning taught me where to look, what to cross-check, and what the silence in a document really means. For the next hour, I traced deeds, transfers, utility filings. Every record said the same thing. Pine Valley's land stopped short of mine. No easement, no right-of-way. Just 30 years of borrowed goodwill. I sat back, eyes on the folder. Inside was that 50-page contract my grandfather signed with the developer in 1998. A 50-year term, fixed monthly rate, professional, clean. But there it was on page 43, highlighted in my grandfather's yellow marker. Termination clause, breach of contract, 90-day notice. Either party may terminate this agreement. In the event of material breach of contract, including, but not limited to, property damage, harassment, trespassing, or failure to maintain mutual respect and goodwill. I'd read that clause 100 times over the years. Never thought I'd need it. I closed the laptop. They thought 30 days was enough time to break me, to take what wasn't theirs. I picked up their notice, folded it into thirds, and slid it into the folder with the power supply agreement. Then I called Iris back. I'm bringing everything. 3 days passed. Thursday morning, I sat across from Iris in her office. This is clear-cut, she said, tapping the survey map. The bridge is entirely on your property. They have no easement, nothing. They'll have to withdraw the notice. But her eyes said careful. I drove home under gray clouds, spent the afternoon trying to keep my hands busy in the workshop. By 10 o'clock that night, the sound came through the walls first, mechanical, distant, wrong for this hour. A saw, the high whine of a chainsaw cutting through wood. I stood up fast, grabbed my jacket, and stepped outside into cold air that tasted like rain. The sound was louder now, coming from the direction of the bridge. I ran, not a full sprint, but close. Then I saw them. 3 men standing on my bridge with power tools and safety vests. Sparks were flying orange into the night. And standing apart from all of them, arms crossed, watching like a foreman, was Constance Whitmore. Stop! I shouted it across the darkness, my voice swallowed by the noise. I got closer, close enough to feel the vibration of the saw through the planks. Stop! This is private property. You're trespassing. The man with the saw finally looked up, killed the motor. The sudden silence felt too big. Constance smiled, sharp, cold. Mr. Merrick, she said, calm, practiced. You received notice. We're simply removing the hazard. This bridge is on my land. I said, you have no easement, no right to be here. She reached into her jacket and pulled out a folded paper, another document, likely another lie. We have documentation that says otherwise. You can challenge it in court if you'd like, but by then this hazard will be gone. She turned to the workers. Continue. I pulled out my phone and dialed 911. The operator answered with static. I gave my address, said there were trespassers destroying my property. She told me officers were en route, estimated 20 minutes. I hung up and just stood there, watching them tear apart something my grandfather had built with his hands. By the time Officer Dunner arrived, they'd cut through a third of the bridge deck. Dunner looked at the scene, took notes, but shook his head. This looks like a civil matter, he said finally. Without a restraining order or injunction, I can't intervene. You need to take this to court. He got back in his car and left. The saw started up again. I stood there until they finished for the night, until Constance drove away without looking at me once. The bridge had a 10-foot gap now, sections of decking torn away. I couldn't cross, couldn't drive out. I had to walk back, leaving the lights off. The dark felt heavier now, pressing in like the quiet after a funeral. I thought about my grandfather's words carved on the substation stone. Power serves, it does not rule. And then I thought about the contract, about page 43. I stood up and turned on the kitchen light, opening my laptop. I started drafting an email to Iris with the subject line, "We need to talk." Tomorrow, Friday morning, I was at Laura's office by 8. The conference table was covered in evidence. Drone video of the 10-foot break, photographs of the damage, tire tracks. "This is bad," Laura said, "but also good. Trespass, property destruction, open and shut." "There's more," I said. I told her about the power, about the substation, about the contract my grandfather signed 50 years ago. She leaned back in her chair, staring at the ceiling. "That changes everything. You're not just the victim here. You're holding leverage they don't know about. But we need to be careful," she warned. "If we play this wrong, you become the villain." Man cuts power to 120 families, children, elderly, medical equipment. "I'm not trying to hurt anyone," I insisted. "I'm trying to make them understand there are consequences." "Then we do this right. We send them a notice of breach, list every violation, trespassing, property damage, harassment. Then we give them a choice: repair the bridge, pay damages, public apology, and replace the president." She typed fast. "If they refuse, then we issue the 90-day termination notice for the power contract." We spent 2 hours drafting the notice, 8 pages, detailing every violation, citing property law, contract law, precedent cases. "This is a nuclear option," she said again. "Once we send this, there's no taking it back." I thought about Constance standing in the work lights, watching them tear everything apart. "Send it," I said. I drove straight to the county clerk's office, spent 3 hours pulling files. I confirmed everything, no recorded easement. Pine Valley Estates was incorporated in '95, but my property predated everything. I found my grandfather's handwritten notes in the margins. "Built this substation for the future." Never thought they'd be so ungrateful. The power supply agreement was straightforward. 50-year term, $2,000 fixed monthly rate. And there it was on page 43. Termination clause, breach of contract, 90-day notice. My phone buzzed. Text from Laura. Notice of breach sent via certified mail and email. Copies to the entire HOA board. Expect a response within 24 hours. 10 minutes later, an unknown number called. I let it go to voicemail. Constance Whitmore's voice, tight with anger. "You can't do this. You can't threaten to cut power to an entire community. I'll bury you in court." I saved the voicemail. "What happens now?" I texted Laura. Her reply, "Now we wait." We gave them the terms. They have 90 days to decide if their pride is worth sitting in the dark. Saturday morning, they responded. HOA letterhead. They denied wrongdoing, claimed the removal was justified, and threatened a countersuit for extortion. They had lawyered up with a corporate firm out of the city. I reviewed the power agreement line by line. It was airtight. "What about the families?" I asked Laura. "Their board made the call," she said. "Consequences follow leadership. Still, we'll give them options. Fix the bridge, pay damages, apologize, replace the president. If they refuse, the blackout's on them." Later, I got a call from a professional, smooth voice. "Mr. Merrick, we're prepared to negotiate a settlement. We're offering to rebuild the bridge at HOA expense." "Negotiate what?" I asked. "You destroyed my property. Repair it, pay for it, apologize for it. That's not a negotiation. That's the consequences." In return, the voice continued, "We ask that you withdraw the power termination threat and sign a formal easement agreement for community access." I felt something cold settle in my chest. No, you don't get to destroy something and then buy your way into owning it. The bridge stays private property. You repair it because you broke it. If you proceed with the power termination, he threatened, we'll file for an injunction. We'll sue for damages. We'll make sure every media outlet knows you're holding families hostage over a property dispute. File whatever you want, I said. My grandfather built that substation 70 years ago. Your community exists because of the infrastructure we provided. And you thanked us by destroying property in the middle of the night. You have 30 days to meet the terms in the notice of breach. After that, you have 90 days to find another power source. I hung up. I sat in the shadows of my kitchen, watching Pine Valley's lights flicker on. I was Goliath somehow, the powerful one, the threat. I pulled out the folder. Power serves. It does not rule. But service requires respect. My phone buzzed. HOA filing emergency injunction, hearing Monday morning. I texted back, set up the media. I'll talk to him. Sunday afternoon, the reporter showed up. Mid-30s, tired eyes. We sat on my porch. I walked him through everything. The deed, the destruction, Officer Dunner saying it was a civil matter. And the power? He asked. People are saying you're threatening to cut electricity to 120 families. I'm not threatening anyone. I'm enforcing a contract they violated. I offered them multiple ways to fix this. Repair the bridge. Pay damages. Apologize. Remove the president who ordered the destruction. They refused everything. I leaned forward. I didn't start this. I'm just the one who's not backing down. What do you want people to know? I want them to know that power, real power, isn't about who shouts loudest. It's about who built the infrastructure, who maintained it, who kept it running when nobody was paying attention. My grandfather built that substation in 1975 when this valley was empty. And for 50 years, it did, until someone decided respect was optional. The article hit Wednesday, front page. Local man fights back against HOA overreach. But who's really in the wrong? The comment section exploded. I was called everything from a hero to a heartless monster. Monday morning brought the injunction hearing. The HOA's lawyer painted me as a man weaponizing utilities to punish innocent people. My lawyer stood, quieter, calmer. She laid out the facts. Nighttime trespassing, property destruction, no recorded easement. She showed the judge the power supply agreement. Mr. Merrick is simply exercising his legal rights under a contract both parties signed. The judge leaned back. The HOA clearly violated Mr. Merrick's property rights. The injunction is denied. However, he ordered both parties into mediation. I urge you to consider the impact on residents who bear no responsibility for this situation. I looked at the reporter's camera outside. I'm asking them to repair what they destroyed. That's all. If they choose pride over accountability, the consequences are theirs. 2 days later, the moment of truth, the emergency town hall. I walked in uninvited. The room was packed, tense. Constance sat at the front, defiant. The veteran board member stood up. My name is on the board, and I need to say something. I let her consolidate power because it was easier than fighting. That was cowardly. He turned to Constance. Did we have the legal right to destroy private property? Constance opened her mouth, but her lawyer pulled her back. She sat down. The veteran looked at the crowd. We need new leadership. I'm calling for a vote of no confidence in the president. Chaos. Then I spoke. I'm Silas Merrick. The room went silent. I came to hear what you'd say, to see if anyone would take responsibility. I looked at Constance. Your board destroyed my property in the middle of the night. You're in this situation because your leadership chose pride over accountability. I'm not your enemy. I'm just the person who finally said no. A thin, elderly woman near the front asked, what do we do? You vote. You hold your board accountable. You remove the people who put you in this situation. And you make it right. You have 90 days to find alternative power. That's more than fair. I turned to leave. And for what it's worth, I don't want to cut anyone's power. I just want basic respect. 2 weeks later, the paper ran a follow-up. Pine Valley HOA president resigns amid scandal. The financial audit, requested by the veteran board member, found $12,000 in misused HOA funds. Constance resigned, refused all interviews, and was selling her house, moving out of state. Construction crews worked quickly. New lumber, reinforced supports. The bridge was rebuilt. The veteran board member came to my porch, apologized again, and offered me a seat on their new neighbor relations committee. I told him I'd think about it. The large envelope came from Laura, the settlement agreement. The HOA agreed to pay $30,000 for bridge repairs, legal fees, and damages. They agreed to permanent recognition of my property rights. And they agreed to install a new plaque. I signed it. I drove to the substation that evening. The equipment hummed. I looked at the cornerstone. Power serves, it does not rule. I finally understood. Power was service. Power was responsibility. But power was also knowing when to say no. Knowing when to draw boundaries. 3 months later, I sat on my porch, coffee in hand. The bridge stood complete. The plaque read, Merrick Bridge, private property, EST 1954. Community access granted with gratitude. I made peace with the outcome, not by cutting the power, but by forcing them to respect the source. That was the gift my grandfather had given this valley. Not power, but reliability. Not control, but service, backed by the strength to defend it. So tell me, what is the true limit of HOA authority in America, and what would you have done with the power to cut the electricity? Was I justified in using the 90-day notice, knowing it would terrify innocent families? Or was that necessary to force the board's hand and expose the corruption? Drop your opinion below and share this story if you believe respect should always precede authority.